Welcome everyone. My name is Emma, and on behalf of Emmy, Gregory and Joseph, I would like to thank you for participating in our presentation wherein we will explore the utopian visionary Lewis Mumford and the notion of the ideal city. We would like to extend a warm welcome to Shora as well as other participating members of the Curtin University community to our presentation. I will be delivering an introduction to the 20th century historian, philosopher and author himself, and will also discuss Mumford's application of organic humanism and how this notion has helped establish a moral compass within architecture. Expanding upon this, Gregory will explore Mumford's notion of techniques with an inherent focus on the relationship between biotechnics and megatechnics in particular. Following this, Joseph will then discuss in further detail Mumford's understanding of the urban form and civilization that manifested as a result of architectural development. And finally, Emmy will conclusively explore Mumford's notion of the mega machine and the garden city ideal, and how Mumford's literary dialogues have imparted wisdom and teachings upon his past, present, and future audiences. Together, our team will reflect upon Mumford's theoretical approach to the ideal cityscape and critique an emerged debate of ethics that questions whether architects should aspire to progress for the sake of prowess or exercise restraint for the sake of our collective well-being. Lewis Mumford, born in the United States of America in 1895, was a man disturbed by the antagonistic and hostile world that enveloped him. Having witnessed the atrocities of the First World War directly, he became fixated by the composition of the urban fabric that seemingly lacked substance and thought. Over the course of Mumford's career, he developed a number of great literary works that contained articulate and evocative responses to the ways in which humanity seeks and achieves purpose and meaning through its architectural constructs. Mumford's introduction to the philosophical sphere arose in 1919, where he began work as the associate editor for modernist literary magazine The Dial. Through early exposure to such an artistic and progressive environment, Mumford embraced an era of emerging philosophical thought. Progressing from editor to architectural commentator for The New Yorker, Mumford was gifted a platform of which he could express his beliefs surrounding architectural and societal values. During this time, profoundly reactive schools of thought such as behaviorism and Gestalt psychology had become particularly fashionable and reflected Mumford's ideological approach to a society that was becoming conditioned as a whole by its architecture. The rapid technological and architectural advancements of the 20th century effectively roused a desire for an imagined utopia for many. However, so too did it inspire a great number of critics, commonly anti-technological and nihilistic in their modes of thinking. Mumford, an emerged idealist with somewhat of a technophobic inclination, observed vast changes to his world that would pique his interest for almost a century. As a lifelong resident of New York, Mumford had observed the domination of the motor car, the skyscraper, and the arrival of planned obsolescence within marketing campaigns. Resultantly, Mumford began to unsettle and question the cityscape he called home. As the saying goes, New York, the city so nice they named it twice, it has been regarded as one of the most advanced and desirable cities in the world. However, Mumford once said that New York is the perfect model of a city, not the model of a perfect city. Becoming aware of the emerging societal desire to be better or to be the greatest inspired a wave of critical thinking within Mumford and brought the notion of organic humanism to light. Organic humanism, the study of humanity and our natural limitations as human beings. Mumford believed that our evolution in all regards should be shaped by our own human abilities and constraints, rather than work toward a world of convenience that often falls victim to slothfulness and disconnect. Instead, society ought to strive to achieve quality, endurance, and significance. Mumford was exceptionally critical of the ways in which new buildings replaced or dwarfed old buildings, resulting in an entirely confused and overshadowed landscape. The tone of Mumford's literary work shifted as New York shifted over time, with his distaste and resentment for its harshness and commercial nature ever present. New York, ever considerate of economic prosperity, matured rapidly and reduced the value of human experience to excessive architectural thought. New York would continue to hustle and bustle, regardless of whether its occupants were satisfied or not. The city no longer stood for its people, but for its marketplace trading and its technologically embracive disposition. While Mumford's spirit and youthful interpretation of the city he once knew had become tainted by distrust, it was not an erroneous analysis of the city of New York, nor of the city as an architectural concept.
Two of the main themes of Lewis Mumford's work are the ideas of megatechnics and biotechnics, and how they interrelate to inform the way that people exist in society. In order to understand these ideas, we need to first look at the underlying factors and concepts that influenced Mumford's thinking. Lewis Mumford's life spanned 94 years from 1895 until 1990. During this time, he witnessed the most rapid technological change and two of the worst wars in human history. The pace of change often outstripped societal ability to process it, and with the ever-looming threat of the Cold War and nuclear devastation, it is not surprising that there was a tendency to view the future in a dystopian light. Another idea that is crucial to understanding Mumford's views is the concept of the abstraction of wealth. Mumford argued that wealth as a concept was originally constrained by its physicality. Wealth was determined by the physical presence of items considered valuable, such as livestock, land, grain, or gold. A person's wealth was limited by their ability to store it. If a person's land could support 6 cows, then that was the limit of their wealth. Having 12 cows would simply overgraze their land and their cows would starve, destroying both their livestock and the value of their land as well. With the advent of more advanced accounting and banking, wealth became an abstract concept. Once reduced to numbers on a page, the physical limitations on wealth accumulation were removed, and so wealth has become a limitless objective, divorced from the world in which it is generated. With these 2 points in mind, we can revisit Mumford's themes of megatechnics and biotechnics. Megatechnics, in Mumford's view, is the unrestrained expansion of technology regardless of its impact or purpose. While his views are often considered pessimistic and possibly anti-technology, it is important to note that he was not technophobic. He held that man's ability to create new things is admirable. However, he was highly critical of the way that modern society implemented such things. Mumford saw that rampant overproduction of modern society conflicted with his idea of organic humanism. Technological expansion was no longer driven by the need to produce something useful, but by the desire to create wealth and entrench power structures. This has led to wasteful production involving planned obsolescence, faulty design, and cosmetic variants simply for the purpose of creating wealth. Mumford observed that in contrast with its advantages, unrestrained production also created a negative impact on society through its neglect of the physical environment. In order for a society to thrive, it must provide for its physical needs. A society that can sustainably support all its economic, social, and spiritual needs is considered to be bioviable. Mumford notes that as cities transform from their village origins, the specialisation of industry causes an increase in economic power but a reduction in bioviability until they reach a point that the city cannot sustain itself. Waste and pollution, along with the reduced capacity to provide for its agricultural needs, leads to the subjugation of people's social requirements in order to promote the economic advantages of megatechnics. Mumford's solution to the detrimental effects of megatechnics can be seen in what he describes as biotechnics. This is where the rate of technological expansion is limited by societal reverence of the natural world in which it exists. If society raises the importance of the quality of people's lives in terms of access to food, clean water, amenity, and positive social interaction above the desire to create wealth, then technological perfection can be approached and durability and value will be returned to technological production. One of the ways Mumford proposed that this could be achieved was through the development of garden cities, as defined by Ebenezer Howard. These cities are limited in size in accordance with their ability to sustain a population. The design is centred around an economic, residential and bureaucratic hub with roads radiating from the centre, surrounded by green space devoted to agriculture and recreation. Industrial processes are developed within the confines of the city in a way that can provide sufficient resources to enable a desirable social environment. An example of a city designed on these principles can be seen in Canberra in the ACT. This is Mumford's key concern and focus, that a city should be planned and developed with the social, spiritual and physical needs of its inhabitants as a primary decision-making process. Technological development and expansion should be subservient to these needs rather than the reverse.
Perception on urban civilization. First of all, the implication of urban civilization would be as below. People moving from rural to urban area, and this lead to increase of urban area population. Following with the development of kingship in the city center, which is the political system existed in the city. Therefore, the population in the urban area is highly dependent on rural area. Moving forward to criticism of Lewis Mumford's on the urban civilization. Mumford had been strongly criticized on urban sprawl, in which the formation of modern cities had brought up a lot of social issues which existed throughout the Western society. Mumford also wrote critically in the culture of cities, stating that a modern city is known to be product of earth, a fact of nature, man's method of expression. Mumford stressed on the importance of understanding the relationship between nature and individual spiritually. Instead, the physical design and economical surpluses are considered as secondary. For example, there are many housing plans which are known to be handicapped due to lack of understanding the social functions of the existing city. From Mumford's perception, the city came into existence starting from the villages that dominated the region, also known as Fertile Crescent, and was characterized as ideal life. Also, he mentioned that those people have thought to introduce new experiences and innovations that appears to be a manner of. However, many of these characteristics of city were already found in the villages' practices. For instance, the house, shire, agora, public wear, and the cisterns were all considered as embryonic structure and inventions of the villages. Some other institution formation in the villages were also being brought up in the city. As an example, the Council of Elders, who existed in most villages, acting as an organization that initiated the framework of ethics and morality, government and authority, regulations and law. Although the tradition in the citadel seems to contradict with the villages, wherein they focus on will to power, emphasized in competition, contradiction and oppositions. Thus, it has then been useful for the need of protection against invaders and having control power over the dissident groups. Next would be the beginning of urban impulsion and the related elements. Mumford did mention about factors contributing to the birth of civilization, which are the climate, availability of transport, use of the soil, and these are all known to be the primary set of circumstances over years to emerging cities near the easterns. Mumford also stated the actual process of the early city formation, other than wiping out the earlier elements in cultural practices, had actually brought them together, increasing efficacy and scope. Many functions and components which are unorganized were brought together in a state, forming a dynamic tension among people. The feature of urban life is known to be a magnet, where it attracts outsiders coming in for religious, commercial and social purpose, and it became a permanent place for social gathering and assembly. Another element used by Mumford to describe the city is the container, as it could be interpreted as a physical and permanent structure where diverse activities of the city were transmitted and performed. Through Mumford's clarification, the city is eventually acting as a storehouse, conservator, and accumulator. Furthermore, drama and dialogue are another symbol that justify the life of city, as he called it, the urban drama. The dialogues of the city can be known to be those political debates, improvement of political crises, or solutions. He found that in earlier cities, the rarity of true dialogue due to the absolute power lies with the priests and kings. He tends to stress on social and cultural values of human community, although the urban drama had led the city to a theatre of social actions. Therefore, Mumford will actually critiques a lot about the implication relating to the development of urban cities, as he always believed that the urban area was still depending on the rural area in different aspects, and it could be clearly seen that Lewis Mumford's perception on putting the main functions of city as a ruling center and economical tunnel as a secondary, thus putting the spiritual and cultural values of existing human community first.
Lewis Mumford was very firm in his belief that the tool did not set humans apart, but instead their ability to communicate. In The Myth of the Machine, Mumford says, "There was nothing uniquely human in tool-making until it was modified by linguistic symbols, aesthetic designs, and socially transmitted knowledge." His understanding of human development and the role techniques has played forms a solid foundation to his later theories, such as his mega-machine theory that Greg explored earlier. Through this ability to communicate and believe in power, he says a human society became a mega-machine, a machine whose components are humans. He developed this theory during his research for the city and history, believing that the Pyramid Age was the first example of the mega-machine in the way that society was ordered, and specifically in the advances of art, law, and ceremony. He found that although the mega-machine achieved much culturally that society otherwise would not have, he believed it to be the start of the social regression that comes with technology. Although he forever remained critical of the mega-machine, later he developed his definition of mega-machine into a much more positive one. Invisible structure composed of living, but rigid human parts, each assigned to his special office, role, and task, to make possible work output and grand designs of this great collective organization. His main concerns with the mega-machine are the same as the concerns he holds against megatechnics and all technology. That it is the opposite of ideal for humans. The human needs have been forgotten. Mumford criticised the commercialisation of the new cities that have also forgotten the primal human need. He wrote, "Private commercial venture to be carved up in any fashion that might increase the turnover and further the rise in land values." Mumford suggested that the best alternative was Ebenezer Howard's Garden City. Throughout his work, The City and History, Mumford seems to return to the idea of social living as a basis of an ideal city, highly critical of commercialisation of city and, in turn, capitalism. He talked about the delight and happiness society could have from regular work and sharing within their community, rather than the curse and penalty of the commercialised society. One key exception he discussed was the city of Amsterdam. He was clear in his notes that the foreplanning and learning from other cities, the open spaces and allowance for garden, was what made Amsterdam great, and he was still critical of the privatisation of expansion. He draws similarities between Howard's Garden City ideas and Amsterdam, and criticises those who cannot see past modern-day living, the Garden City a utopian myth that could not survive modern technology age. In her book, The Ideal City, Helen Rose now more simply agrees with Mumford here. in that she believes Howard's own followers not understand his ideas. Perhaps that they see his ideas with their own modern technological context. However, although Mumford sings Howard's Garden City many praises, he still sees it through a critical eye and believes it to be just the beginning of an idea which could be far improved for more success, while Rosenau doesn't confirm whether she believes the Garden City can be an ideal solution in the future. Mumford goes on to acknowledge those who disagree with his foresight, accusing them of ignorance, particularly ignorance of our urban and cultural history. Most would agree history has a great part in shaping our future. Perhaps Mumford would have been less critical today if he'd been around to see firsthand the large part sustainability has taken in our society. Or perhaps, as seems across Mumford's work, there is always more to improve. After reflection on who Lewis Mumford was and some of his context, Emma established the importance of organic humanism to Mumford's beliefs, which shaped much of his criticisms of commercialised cities and technologies. Delving further into the societal context of Mumford's early years, Gregory exemplified abstraction of wealth. He explained that Lewis Mumford was not critical of progression, but of the unrestricted expansion and planned obsolescence of technology, megatechnics. He showed that Mumford was rationally concerned for the well-being of humanity and the natural, the importance of bioviability in society. Mumford was a strong believer that the livability in a city was not made through economic advances or structural design, but a close relationship between the natural and the spiritual. Joseph spoke about this, highlighting Mumford's view that history is important, how and why cities were developed. Joseph showed that Lewis Mumford truly cared about the bioviability of the city. Society cannot be without cities, but cities cannot exist without the rural, and should put physical design second to the natural environment and spiritual values. He was adamant that the architecture in cities should find precedent. We learn from our past. He was excited by the idea of a society who worked alongside each other for the collective good of the community, like the Garden City design, rather than working collectively for a power over the community as in the mega machine, as I spoke about earlier. The underlying idea seems to be that Mumford believes an ideal city to be one that supports and celebrates the human, of our spirituality, our communication abilities, our abilities of teamwork, and our connection to nature, not one that supports the creations of human, our technologies and capitalisms. While this may seem very rudimentary, he's not wrong. It's the age-old form versus function argument, where Mumford believes the function of the wider community should be considered for all architecture and planning. Although Mumford believes all his work is one from one main idea, his idea is not a final solution. He does not know what the ideal city is. He does, however, present ideas of what makes an ideal city that others can learn from, just as Mumford has from others he has studied.